Hi, yeah, I'm Alex, a researcher based at CCRI, and I'm going to introduce you to the Future of UK Treescapes programme. And maybe it's interesting in terms of all the different projects we've been hearing about today, to show some of the sort of range of things that we do at CCRI, because it's actually a research funding programme rather than a research project. It funds research projects. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the Treescapes Ambassador team, of which I am one. The Treescapes programme itself, some of the funded projects and fellows, the role of the ambassadors and ambassador team, and then if we have time, I might be being a bit ambitious actually. Some of the other research we do focused on treescapes at CCRI. So, oh gosh, that's quite big, isn't it? That's us in Goodenough, Norway. So an interesting approach that the research councils use now when delivering research funding programs is to have champions or ambassadors from within that research community as part of the delivery of the program. So as the ambassador team, we kind of sit between the researchers that are accessing the funding and using the funding to produce new evidence, and the research funders. We sit in between them and we can communicate up to the research funders how researchers are experiencing the scheme, the kind of gaps that there seem to be within the scheme, and report to them on how the projects that are funded are progressing. And then the research funders themselves can kind of funnel stuff down to us, and we can feed it through to that research community. So you have Julie and Clive, who are the Treescapes ambassadors. They are both very experienced researchers in the treescapes field and supply their expertise. And then they've got me, who tries to chase everybody and make sure that everybody's delivering what they should be, and Abby, who is our communications officer. But Julie and I are based at CCRI, and Clive and Abby at Imperial College. So just to give you a bit of context to the programme, it really started to be seen as a priority to have more research in this area, coordinated programme research, in the context of very ambitious targets for tree planting in the UK. There's some of the numbers there, they're really quite exciting. Historically, the UK has had quite low woodland cover more recently compared to perhaps other European countries. But there's very ambitious targets to increase it as part of a natural solution to meeting net zero. But it's not going to be easy to meet those targets, and I can tell you that so far we haven't successfully managed to do that. So we need some of the best science to base woodland expansion on. We need to understand how to do it in a way that is sensitive to the very many different services that treescapes provide and the cultural values associated with them. So a bit about the programme itself. So it represents quite large investment of research funding, £15.7 million. And it's an interdisciplinary research programme funded by 3 different research councils. You can see down at the bottom there. And also the first call, which was the largest call, had funding from DEFRA and Forestry Commission and the devolved authorities as well. And the themes that are built into the programme, that the different calls, we've had 3 different calls as well as a fellowship scheme, are these 3 themes that you can see at the side. One around the forms and functions and values of UK treescapes. What are treescapes already delivering for us in the UK? And then the 7th theme around opportunities, barriers and pathways for expansion of UK treescapes. How can we increase and meet some of those ambitious targets based on the best science? But then we also have a 3rd theme, which is about the resilience of UK treescapes to global change. So some of the real risks to our existing treescapes, increased risks of pests and diseases, and impacts of climate change. How can we hope to conserve what we've already got and expand it given those important risks? So yes, as I mentioned, we've had 3 different calls, and they'd produced some really exciting projects, which you can see down at the bottom now. We've just announced the final call 3 successful projects. The first call was already written when we came to it as the ambassador team by the funders, but we've actually had a much more active role in the following calls. We've been able to work with the research community to try to identify where there are gaps in evidence and how to successfully meet those gaps. And then the final set of projects are really around knowledge exchange, looking at some of the existing or emerging results from Core 1 and 2 projects and making them even more accessible to stakeholders and pulling together some kind of program level results. What can we find out from everything that's emerged across the program? And a really important part of what we do is our involvement of stakeholders. So an important route towards that is our program advisory board, who we consult a lot on how the program is proceeding, what they think it ought to be doing, and how the research emerging from it, how that's going to land with the people that need to use it on the ground to expand our treescapes and carry on protecting them. This is just an example of part of the program to try and give you an idea of some of the diversity of types of projects that can be funded under UK Treescapes. This is actually a little bit of the program we're particularly proud of, because the ambassador team got to run the entire call. So we got to design it and announce it and review the proposals for researchers and tell them they were successful. That was very exciting. And interview them. But yeah, just and they represent a really great investment, actually, fellowships, because for a relatively small amount of funding, people create these really ambitious proposals, and they're very committed, and hopefully it really progresses their career. And it really helps join up the community of researchers, because they're very dynamic and active, working with all the different actors in the existing project. So they're a great little community of researchers in themselves. So just to go into a bit more depth in as to what the ambassador team do, gosh, we do such a lot. Yeah. That's what I thought when I put this together. Clive and Julie in particular have to have a really great oversight of what's happening within treescapes research, to be able to design calls and to be able to make sure that those are going to trigger the right kinds of research projects in the right kinds of area. They're open calls, but are designed in a way to ensure interdisciplinarity. So a key part of the program has been to recognise that we'll only answer questions about treescape expansion by having interdisciplinary projects, and actually transdisciplinary projects that will engage stakeholders right from the start. But we also support just the research funding processes, which I sounded very excited about, didn't I? That in terms of the fellowships, there's a lot of admin to do, just getting people to apply for things and to review them, and there's an awful lot involved. But yes, this championing of stakeholder engagement, we have these interactions with our program advisory board, so with people like the National Trust, the Woodland Trust, various bodies that represent foresters of forestry, DEFRA and the devolved administrations are part of that stakeholder group. So that's a key way that we make sure that stakeholders are engaged. But we also try to create knowledge exchange opportunities, things like seminars that are really focused on a stakeholder audience, so that people on the ground can pick up what's relevant emerging from research results from the projects. Another key role is to facilitate this interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity that I was talking about. So part of this, as I've said, is through the core design, making sure that the right kind of projects can be put together and that they do represent each of the disciplines that the research councils are seeking to engage in the programme. But it's also about making sure that we recognise that organisations who sit outside of academia are an important part of this research process as well. And it's taken quite a lot to work with the research councils and say that those people need equal recognition in terms of funding. They ought to be able to access funding to be able to be part of these projects. And actually that's a shifting landscape that more and more people are realising, that if transdisciplinary collaboration is really what we're seeking to achieve, then we have to recognise people from outside academia as equal partners. Monitoring evaluation, that's exactly what it says. It's a lot of nagging people to say, oh, how's it going? How's it getting on? Have you managed to achieve your objectives? Tell me anything you're struggling with. But it's an interesting relationship. You have to try and establish a relationship of trust with the projects so they can really tell you how they're getting on, and actually are they facing a challenge and something that we might be able to help them with and provide support. So it's an important part of what we do. It's a unique opportunity. You brought together all these incredibly knowledgeable learners, people, and we have access to each other. We can communicate relatively easy, and we can bring them together through events. We have an annual conference, and we can share learning, importantly. We can share our lessons around some of the challenges that we face. Building strong policy connections. This has been a really interesting part of what we do, developing over time. So DEFRA and the devolved authorities were involved through funding at the beginning, but in a way their role was quite sat back. They provided that funding, and that was the extent of their involvement. I think they have one representative on the executive board that we report to. And we've really worked hard, particularly Julie, through the Robbling Advisory Group she has, and Clive, to try and make sure that what's emerging from the programme is really relevant to the government's strategic evidence priorities. They understand what's emerging. They can see where there are crossovers with what they need to know. They're not going to double fund different projects. They're not going to ignore evidence that's out there that they can make use of. They're really keyed into it. And this has increased. DEFRA have funded 4 of our fellows, and that's really nice because then they have a really direct route into the programme, and I think those fellows have really benefited from that direct relationship as well. The next stage of the programme now is to kind of move on to thinking about programme level outputs. What do we need to provide that communicates what the programme has done, what the different research projects have produced? How do we draw that together? So, I don't know, a glossy report, some policy and practice notes. That's what we need to think about now, and so we can draw towards the latter part of the programme. But also we've been trying to look to the future, think about that community that has come together and where do they go next, and what are the important issues emerging now within Treescapes that need to be addressed. And we've got a unique opportunity to do it. We've got all of these researchers who we can say, okay, so we've done all this, where did we go? So we've been working with our programme advisory board and with researchers involved in the programme, researchers from further afield, to try and look at how we influence a future funding programme that will really produce the next lot of Treescapes-focused research in a forward way. Now I'm just going to talk a bit about, as UK Treescapes, I work on it 50% of the time, but it's kind of a small part of what we're doing at CCRI that focuses on treescapes research. So Julie and I try to have a think about what unites how the research that we do, how can we divide it up, and there's actually all different ways you could divide it up because there's a huge amount of diversity actually of research that we do that touches on treescapes, but we came up with thinking that it could be spoken about in terms of the ambitions that the research has. So an ambition to provide social science evidence to support policy making on trees, woods and forests, an ambition to understand land manager behaviours and attitudes towards trees, woods and forests, because that's particularly key in terms of thinking about treescape expansion. A lot of that's going to be asking potentially farmers to plant more trees on their land, so we definitely need to understand how they look after their trees right now and whether they're prepared to look after any more farms anymore in the future. Another strand is an ambition to understand the cultural and well-being values associated with trees, woods and forests. It's a particular interest of mine. Why do trees, woods and forests make us feel good is something I'm particularly focused on researching. And we're also really committed to trying to use these interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approaches, teams, approaches, methods for understanding trees, woods and forests, because it just seems a logical way to really get comprehensive understanding on what's going on. And this is a very dense slide. I don't expect you to read it all, but it's just some really nice examples of the different projects that we've been doing famously, and it is actually only a snapshot of what we've been doing, but they all fall into those various areas.